I never thought a single morning could split my life into a before and an after. Yet, there I was in our cramped living room in suburban Illinois, standing in the blazer I had carefully steamed for the only job interview I had managed to secure in years, when everything detonated in one brutal, irreversible moment. My father's fist came at me faster than my brain could register, a violent blur that connected with the side of my face so hard that the world snapped sideways and a white flash of pain exploded beneath my skin. I felt the impact ricochet through my jaw and cheekbone, as if someone had struck the inside of my skull with a hammer, and then I was on the floor, disoriented, my palms scraping against the carpet while a sharp metallic taste filled my mouth. Blood pooled under my tongue as the room swayed and my cheek began to swell with frightening speed. The ringing in my ears mixed with the shaky sound of my own breath, but before I could even process the agony shooting down my neck, I heard a chirpy digital beep followed by my younger sister Savannah's excited voice, bright and artificial, like she had stepped into character for an audience. She stood a few feet away, angling her phone with the kind of enthusiasm she usually reserved for brand deals, her eyes gleaming as she whispered, "OMG, guys," real drama into her microphone, as if my collapse was nothing more than chaotic content for her followers. For a second, I wondered if my pain looked good in her ring light reflection, because she certainly was not concerned with helping me, or even reacting with the slightest shock. She moved to get a better angle, her bracelets jingling as she leaned closer, filming my bloodied face like she had stumbled upon the viral clip she had always wanted. My mother stood near the kitchen doorway, not rushing to me or shouting at my father, but pressing her fingertips against her temple with an exhausted sigh, the same theatrical exhale she always used when she wanted the world to know that I personally made her life harder. She looked at me with the cold resignation of someone who had already chosen a side long before the conflict even began. She muttered, "Jesus, Elena, why do you always make everything harder?" Like I had summoned the punch, like I was responsible for the chaos splattered across the floor. My father stood above me, chest heaving, his breath hot with the anger he had cultivated for years, the anger that always simmered just beneath the surface and erupted whenever he felt someone challenged his authority. His eyes burned with certainty, not remorse, as he shouted, "You do not matter in this house! You never did!" His voice cracking with the conviction of a man who believed he was delivering truth rather than cruelty. The words pierced deeper than the blow, slicing through every fragile piece of hope I had tried to build over the years. As I tried to push myself up, pain shot across the left side of my face and radiated into my temple. My cheek was already throbbing, swelling so quickly that the skin felt stretched and foreign. I could not tell if my face was bruised, fractured, or simply shocked into numbness, but I knew something was wrong. My breathing became uneven as the adrenaline faded and the real pain took its place. Still, the worst part was not the physical injury. It was the way Savannah zoomed in on my trembling fingers and whispered, "This is insane," like she was reporting live from a celebrity scandal instead of watching her sister struggle to lift her head. My father paced in front of me, muttering curses under his breath, still vibrating with rage, as if striking me had not satisfied whatever storm was raging inside him. My mother moved closer, but instead of helping, she quietly scolded Savannah about her camera angle, as if the only concern she had was how embarrassing family violence might look if it went viral without proper framing. Savannah obediently adjusted her phone, brushing her glossy hair behind her ear with a smile so small and satisfied that I felt something inside me crumple. The carpet scratched my palms, my throat tightened, my heart thudded against my ribs in uneven beats. The humiliation hit harder than the punch. I could feel something in my chest collapsing, something that had held me together through years of insults and silent dinners and nights where I cried into my pillow hoping things would be different. As my father towered over me again, expecting compliance, expecting an apology, expecting me to surrender the way I always had, something shifted inside me. It was not loud or dramatic. It was a quiet snap, like a thin thread breaking after holding too much weight for too long. I realized that they did not love me, had never truly loved me, and believed with their entire being that I deserved nothing more than to be controlled, mocked, and punished. My face throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat as I closed my eyes for a moment and understood with a clarity that terrified me that if I stayed here any longer, I would lose far more than this interview. I would lose myself completely. That punch did not just break my face. It broke the last chain I did not even know I still wore. Hours before my father's fist shattered the fragile version of myself I had spent years trying to keep intact, I woke up with a feeling I had not experienced in a very long time, a kind of quiet hope that felt both foreign and precious, like holding a delicate glass ornament that could slip from my hands at any moment. The sun had barely risen yet. A soft orange glow seeped through the curtains of my small bedroom, illuminating the neatly laid out clothes on my chair. For once, I had taken extra time the night before to make sure everything was perfect. I had steamed my navy blazer twice until every wrinkle disappeared. I had lined up my modest black heels next to the bed. I had printed my resume on thick white paper and placed it into a clean folder the way career advisors always recommend, but I never had the chance to actually follow. Today was my interview with Medavance Health Tech, the only company that had ever given me a real chance. The only interview invitation that had slipped into my inbox after 7 long years of working jobs that drained me physically, mentally, and emotionally. I brushed my fingers over the folder on my nightstand and whispered a small prayer, even though I was never the praying type. I said, please let today be different, because so few days in my life ever felt like they could lead anywhere. I sat at the edge of the bed, remembering all the jobs I had done that led me to this moment. I had changed bedpans at an assisted living facility. I had served coffee while dodging customers who thought snapping their fingers was an acceptable way to summon another human being. I had worked overnight shifts caring for dementia patients who sometimes mistook me for their daughter and begged me not to leave them alone. I had folded clothes at a department store until my hands cracked from winter dryness. I had walked to work in shoes with soles worn thin because saving for better ones always seemed impossible. I carried those years like invisible weights on my shoulders. They reminded me of every step I had taken to get here and every sacrifice I had made to keep going. The interview with Medavance felt like the first real chance to walk toward a future that did not suffocate me. They were one of the fastest growing companies in health technology, and they actually cared about the experiences of people who had worked on the ground, people like me, who understood how the healthcare system failed and how digital tools could make it better. They wanted someone who could empathize with users, not just someone with technical skills. For the first time in years, I felt seen by a job description. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting the collar of my blouse. My hair was tied back neatly, my makeup was simple, and my eyes looked tired but determined. I whispered, "You can do this with the same shaky confidence a child might use when stepping on stage for the first time." Still, something heavy lingered in my chest, a reminder of the house I still lived in. A house where hope could only bloom quietly because too much noise could draw attention. I tiptoed into the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone. The house smelled faintly of yesterday's burnt toast and laundry detergent. The silence was peaceful and rare. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the small table, imagining what life might look like if I got the job. Maybe I could move out of this place. Maybe I could have an apartment with sunlight and shelves full of books. Maybe I could wake up without fear of someone yelling before breakfast. That image felt too good to believe, but I let myself dream for just a moment. I checked the time. I had 2 hours before I needed to leave plenty of time to rehearse my answers. My heart fluttered nervously as I walked back to my room to grab my laptop. That was when Savannah barged into my space without knocking, wearing silk pajamas and holding her phone like it was an additional limb. Her expression was the same one she always wore when she wanted something. She did not greet me or even look at my interview clothes. She simply said, "You need to take me shopping today," like it was already a settled fact. She talked about her live stream event and how she needed someone to record her trying on outfits because her usual friend was busy. She said it like her sister did not have her first career opportunity in 7 years. Her entitlement was a force of nature so heavy and indifferent that it sucked the oxygen out of any room she entered. I told her calmly that I could not. I reminded her about my interview. For a second, she froze as if trying to process why I thought my plans could ever outrank hers. Then she scoffed and flipped her hair, telling me it was only one interview and that her career in social media was happening right now. She said her followers expected content and I had no right to ruin that for her. My stomach tightened. Every time Savannah wanted something, our parents aligned behind her like she was a queen, choosing servants. I tried to remain firm. I said, Savannah, I cannot miss this. This is important. She rolled her eyes dramatically and said she was telling Dad. My blood ran cold because I knew exactly what that meant. She strutted out of my room with her phone pressed to her chest like a trophy. I could already hear the irritation building in my father's voice downstairs. I stood there clutching the folder with my resume. I felt like a fragile thread pulled too tight. I wanted to believe today could still be good. I wanted to believe I had enough strength to fight whatever storm Savannah had just created. I smoothed my blazer one more time, inhaling deeply as I tried to reinforce my resolve. I told myself nothing would ruin this. Not today. Not after everything I had survived. I had no idea then how wrong I was about that. The storm was coming faster than I could imagine, and I was still telling myself the day was filled with promise, even as the walls of the house began to vibrate with the anger of a man who never believed my dreams mattered at all. The moment I stepped out of my room, holding my resume folder against my chest, I could already sense the shift in the air that always preceded a household disaster. It was the sharp tension that crept into the corners of the house. Whenever Savannah felt even mildly inconvenienced, the subtle but unmistakable warning that she was about to turn a simple disagreement into a crisis that would come crashing down on me. I heard her exaggerated sniffles first, then her high-pitched voice echoing from the staircase as she rushed down toward our parents like an actress auditioning for a soap opera. She cried, "Mom, Dad, she is ruining my entire day as if I had committed a betrayal so massive it deserved congressional attention." I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling slowly through my nose because I knew exactly how this scene would unfold. Savannah had built her entire identity on entitlement and theatrics. At 22 years old, she had mastered the art of weaponizing her fragility in ways that always left me bruised in some form. She had thousands of followers who believed she lived a glamorous life and a family who validated her delusions daily. I descended the last few steps cautiously clinging to the narrow hope that maybe this time reason would win, but that hope evaporated the second I saw my parents sitting at the kitchen table staring at Savannah with full sympathy as if she were the wounded party in this argument. She stood in front of them with her lower lip trembling, her hair perfectly tousled like she had practiced this moment in the mirror. She said Elena is refusing to take me shopping and I really need her because my live stream is at 1 and my outfits are not ready and I cannot do all this on my own. She spoke like a dam, breaking words, spilling out faster than logic could keep up, and my mother leaned forward instantly with concern. My dad's eyebrows knitted together, irritation pulsing behind his eyes. I held my folder tighter, feeling my throat dry as I said, "Savannah, I told you I have my interview today. It is the only one I have gotten in years." Her head snapped toward me, eyes widening with exaggerated disbelief, like I had just confessed to abandoning her in the desert. She scoffed loudly and said, "You can go to another interview. My live stream is scheduled. My audience is waiting. You do not get it because you do not have followers or a career happening." I stared at her stunned because she used the word career with the kind of seriousness that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. My mother stepped in, then her voice firm in the way it never was when defending me. She said Savannah is right. It is just one interview. You can reschedule. She needs support and family shows up for family. Hearing that twisted something deep inside me. I replied quietly but firmly, I cannot reschedule. This company gave me one slot only. This might be my chance to finally leave jobs that are killing me. My father shifted in his chair and glared at me like I was an inconvenience that had interrupted his peaceful morning. He said, "You know how important Savannah's online work is to her. Why do you always have to make things harder for everyone else?" The words hit harder because they were so familiar, the same accusation they used every time Savannah wanted something. I stood there in my pressed blazer, feeling small and foolish and exposed, wondering why I had expected anything different. Savannah crossed her arms dramatically and rolled her eyes in a full circle before saying, "I swear you do this on purpose. You love ruining things for me." I felt heat rush to my face. I said, "I am not ruining anything. I have something important today, too. I deserve to go." The room fell silent for a moment, the kind of silence that warns you a storm is about to hit. Savannah's expression hardened. She stepped closer, her perfume flooding the space between us, and whispered with venom, "Only one of us here has a real future, and it is not you." Then she shouted, "Dad, she is being impossible." That was the trigger. My father slammed his palm against the table, the sound cracking through the kitchen like a gunshot. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor as he said, "Elena, if your sister needs you, then you take her." That is it. My pulse spiked as I replied, "No, I am going to my interview." Savannah made a dramatic gasp, clutching her chest as if I had stabbed her. She said, "I cannot believe this selfishness. If I miss this live stream, I lose my sponsors, and that affects the whole family. You do nothing for this house. You never have." Her words sliced into me, but something colder spread through my chest. I realized she believed every word she said. She believed her shopping trip mattered more than my entire future. She believed she was the priority because she always had been. My mother placed a hand on Savannah's shoulder like a comforting blanket. She looked at me and said, "Stop being difficult, Elena. Support your sister or stop pretending you care about this family at all." I felt the floor tilt under me. Years of sacrifices, late night shifts, bills paid without thanks. Chores done without acknowledgement, all erased in an instant because Savannah wanted new clothes. Something inside me began to shake, not from fear this time, but from a rising anger I had never allowed myself to feel fully. I said quietly but firmly, "I am not skipping my interview." Savannah shot me a glare full of loathing before she stomped her foot like a child denied candy. Then her entire demeanor shifted. Her tears dried instantly. Her expression sharpened. She lifted her chin and said in a cold, steady voice, "Fine. I will just tell Dad you screamed at me and threatened to ruin my event. We both know who he will believe." My breath caught. That was her true power. Lies. Manipulation. The performance of a victim. She turned on her heel and walked toward the living room where my father waited like a weapon she could load at will. And in that moment, I knew the day was about to explode in ways I still could not imagine. The moment Savannah marched into the living room wearing her fake tears like glitter, I felt the kind of dread that sinks slowly into your bones, heavy and inevitable, like you are watching a train derail in slow motion. My father sat in his usual armchair scrolling through his phone with the irritation of a man who believed the world existed solely to disrupt his peace. When Savannah approached him, her steps delicate and performative, I knew she had already crafted a story in her head, one that would paint her as the wounded princess and me as the villain who had crushed her dreams. She sniffled loudly before saying, "Dad, Elena is being aggressive again and said she does not care about my live stream and she refuses to help me, even though I told her how important it is." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that even I almost questioned my own memory of what had actually happened. My father's eyes snapped up from his phone, narrowing in immediate anger as he barked, "What did you do now, Elena? Not what happened. Not why are you crying, Savannah. It was always my fault before I even spoke a word." I stood near the edge of the kitchen, clutching my folder so tightly, the edges bent under my fingers. I said calmly, "I did not do anything. I only said I cannot skip my interview. That was all." But the truth never mattered in this house. My father rose from his chair with the slow, deliberate movement of a man preparing to deliver judgment. Savannah hovered behind him, her phone tucked against her hip like a secret weapon ready to be drawn the second she needed evidence to twist. My father approached me with the heaviness of a storm cloud, his shoes thudding against the wooden floor. He said, with a low growl, "Your sister works hard for what she has. You think people just give sponsors to whoever. She needs to be there. She needs your support. You will drive her because that is your place in this family." The words stung because they carried a truth I hated. That was exactly how they saw me, not as a daughter with her own life, but as the utility figure in Savannah's spotlight. I lifted my chin, despite the shaking in my hands, and said again, "Dad, I cannot. My interview is in 3 hours. This is the only opportunity I have been given in years. I will not miss it." The room froze for a heartbeat, everything suspended in a fragile moment where my voice echoed louder than I intended. My father stared at me as if he could not comprehend the audacity I had just shown. Then his face twisted into the kind of rage that comes from entitlement control and a lifetime of never being challenged. He stepped closer, invading the space between us, towering over me as he hissed, "You think you matter more than her. You think anyone will hire you. You think someone like you deserves something better." Behind him, Savannah smirked, the expression subtle but unmistakable, like she was savoring the moment I would be put back in place. She said in a soft, trembling voice, "Dad, I am scared. She is yelling at me." It was a performance so dramatic it could have won an award, and it flipped a switch in my father's mind. Without thinking, without blinking, he grabbed my upper arm with so much force that I gasped. He yanked me forward, his fingers digging into my skin, leaving a bruise that would blossom later like a poisoned flower. "Let her apologize," he shouted toward my mother, who stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes darting between us as if she were watching a sporting event rather than an act of violence. She did not move. She did not say stop. She simply clasped her hands together and sighed, like the burden of diffusing tension was too much work. My father shook my arm again and said, "Apologize. Now." I swallowed hard, refusing to let my voice crack. I said I will not apologize for wanting to go to my interview. That sentence broke the small remaining thread of control he had over himself. He shoved me backward so hard that my shoulder slammed into the wall, rattling the frame of a family photo that showed us all smiling in matching sweaters, a lie immortalized in print. The impact made my vision blur, but I still stood upright, refusing to collapse. My father closed the small distance between us again and grabbed both my shoulders, his fingers pressing into bone. I said, "Dad, stop," but he did not hear or did not care. Savannah lifted her phone tapping record with practiced precision. She whispered softly for her camera. "This is crazy," like she was a spectator at a concert instead of a participant in my humiliation. And then it happened. The blow. His fist connected with the left side of my face with a force that felt impossible for someone not trying to kill. Pain detonated in my cheekbone, bursting like fireworks behind my eyelids. The world tilted violently as I stumbled sideways, my legs buckling beneath me. I crashed onto the hardwood floor, my palms scraping against the rough surface as I tried to steady myself. A ringing filled my ears, drowning out everything but the pounding of my own heartbeat. The room began to spin, and for a moment I could not breathe, my lungs refusing to obey. I tasted blood, warm and metallic, pooling under my tongue. Tears sprang to my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I pressed one hand to my face and felt the swelling begin, instantly hot and throbbing, a violent pulse spreading beneath the skin. Through the haze, I heard Savannah giggling quietly, a sound so cruel it twisted my stomach. She adjusted her camera angle, filming the devastation like it was premium content for her followers. She said, "Oh my God. Guys, this is actually happening," and the glee in her voice made everything worse. My father stood over me, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with the aftermath of violence he believed was justified. He said, "You will do what you are told in this house. Do you understand me?" while my mother finally approached, but not to help. She touched my father's elbow lightly and said, "Richard, she will listen. Just calm down, like I was a misbehaving pet, instead of their daughter lying injured on the floor." As I pressed my palm harder against my cheek, emotions crashed inside me in harsh, unpredictable waves. Pain, shame, fury, fear. Something darker, too. Something like the quiet clarity that comes just before a storm breaks. Savannah zoomed in even closer, whispering dramatically for her viewers. "This is insane. I cannot believe this," like she was reacting to a scripted show. She did not see me as a sister. She saw me as content. In that moment, something inside me began to fracture in ways I knew could not be repaired. The pounding in my face grew stronger, radiating down my neck and into my jaw. I tried to breathe, but it felt like every inhale sliced through my ribs. My father's shadow loomed over me large and unyielding, but something in me refused to be swallowed by it. His words earlier echoed through my mind like a prophecy. You do not matter in this house. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. Not because it was true, but because I suddenly understood that this house had never been a home. It had been a prison built out of expectations, fear, and silence. As I lay there trembling on the hardwood floor with blood staining my shirt and my sister's phone recording my humiliation, I felt something shift deep inside me. A quiet vow formed raw and instinctive. This moment would not break me. It would be the one that finally set me free. I stumbled down the hallway with my hand pressed against my throbbing cheek, moving on instinct rather than clarity, because every part of me felt shattered and unmoored, like my body had forgotten how to exist in one piece. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me with a faint, hollow sound that echoed through the tiles, and for a moment I simply leaned against it, breathing in small, shallow gasps as the room tilted gently from side to side. My heart was pounding so fast it felt like it might burst through my ribcage, each beat vibrating against my bruised skin. The light above the mirror flickered slightly as I reached toward the switch, and when the room brightened, the reflection staring back at me made my stomach twist so violently I had to grip the sink to stay upright. My left cheek was already swelling into an unnatural shape. The skin flushed red and beginning to darken at the edges where bruising would soon bloom into shades of purple and blue. A thin line of blood trailed from my nose to my upper lip, drying into a rusty streak against my skin. My eye on that side drooped slightly, the muscles tense and strained, giving my face a distorted, uneven look that made me feel momentarily detached from myself, like I was looking at a stranger who had stepped into my life without warning. I raised trembling fingers to the swelling, flinching at how hot and tender the skin felt beneath the slightest pressure. A wave of nausea surged through me as the reality of the injury settled in. It was not just a bruise. It was a mark carved directly into my identity, a reminder of the deep rot in the family I had spent my entire life trying to please. I watched my reflection blink slowly, lashes clumped with tears that refused to fall. My throat tightened as I whispered softly, "You look like a woman who has been losing for years," and hearing those words spoken out loud made my chest ache in a way that felt worse than the physical pain. I had always tried to believe I was strong, that the insults and dismissals hurled at me were temporary obstacles, not permanent truths. But the face staring back at me told a different story. It showed exhaustion etched into every line, resignation embedded beneath the surface, and a quiet desperation I never wanted to acknowledge. I gripped the edges of the sink harder, the cool porcelain grounding me as the memories of every small cruelty I had endured began rising like old ghosts. Every time my father mocked my ambitions, every time my mother dismissed my feelings, every time Savannah turned my pain into entertainment. Suddenly, those moments connected into a single lifeline that led straight to this one where blood stained my collar and swelling distorted my reflection. For the first time, I saw the full truth. This was not an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a cycle, a legacy I had inherited against my will. My breathing grew uneven as a trembling sob threatened to escape my chest, but I swallowed it back, refusing to let myself fall apart entirely. I stared deeper into the mirror, seeing not just my battered face, but the years of silence I had allowed to build around me. I saw the nights I cried quietly in my room, the days I buried myself in work to avoid being home, the small dreams I tucked away because they felt too fragile to survive in this house. The person looking back at me seemed so tired, so worn, so breakable. But beneath all that brokenness, I sensed something else, too. Something small but undeniable, like a spark hidden under ash. It flickered softly when I imagined my future, not the one my parents demanded, but the one I had secretly hoped for. A future where I did not have to flinch at the sound of footsteps. A future where my worth was not measured against Savannah's whims. A future where I could breathe. The spark grew stronger when I touched the bruise again because the pain forced a realization I had avoided for too long. If I stayed here, if I kept trying to earn love that was never meant for me, I would lose myself completely. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but slowly and inevitably. I straightened my spine, watching the movement reflect back at me as if I were witnessing myself reclaim a piece of my identity inch by inch. The swelling on my face still pulsed in angry waves, but beneath that pain, something inside me felt strangely steady, determined, alive. I wiped the blood from my mouth with the back of my hand, then reached for a tissue to clean the rest, moving with a calmness that surprised me. The tissue came away stained red. I stared at it for a long moment before tossing it into the trash. That was when I understood that this was not just a bruise or a moment of violence. This was the breaking point, the moment the cycle snapped. My father's punch had not created this truth. It had revealed it. As I looked at myself again, bruised and battered yet still standing, I felt a shift deep in my chest, something like resolve forming with slow, deliberate strength. I whispered softly, "You are done living like this." And even though my voice was barely audible, the conviction behind it vibrated through me like a promise I intended to keep. I turned away from the mirror, slowly feeling the weight of the decision settle over me, heavy but right. I was not going to let this house destroy me anymore. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, wiped my cheeks dry, and opened the bathroom door. It was time to save myself. I stepped out of the bathroom with my breath still shaking in my chest, the hallway spinning slightly as the throbbing in my cheek pulsed in slow, brutal waves. The house felt colder now, every shadow sharper, every sound harsher, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the violence that just happened and were waiting for the next blow. My father's voice rumbled from the living room low and irritated, the kind of tone that always warned me he was looking for another reason to explode. I clutched my phone tightly, my fingers trembling around it, and moved quietly toward my bedroom, praying no one would notice me long enough for me to grab my purse and leave. I did not want to speak. I did not want to justify anything. I could still feel the heat of his fist on my skin, the echo of Savannah's delighted whisper behind the camera, the sting of my mother's indifference. I reached my room and shut the door behind me without making a sound, leaning against it as panic pressed against my ribs. I whispered to myself, "You need to leave right now," because staying even 1 second longer felt like handing them permission to finish what they started. I grabbed my purse from the chair and shoved my wallet and keys inside with frantic movements, then looked around the room for anything else I might need. But the truth was, nothing in that room felt like it belonged to me. Not the clothes I bought with minimum wage paychecks. Not the books on the nightstand that I never had time to read. Not the photos tucked into drawers because hanging them on the wall would only invite ridicule. None of it mattered more than getting out alive and getting to the interview that could save my future. Everything I needed fit in the palm of my hand and the small bag on my shoulder. My phone, my ID, my keys. That was it. I heard footsteps in the hallway and froze my heart slamming against my ribs. My father's voice boomed, "Elena, get out here right now!" followed by the harsh stomp of his boots. Panic shot through me like ice. If he saw me trying to leave, the next blow could be worse. I moved to the window and considered climbing out, but the drop to the ground would likely injure me even more. I opened the door a crack and listened. Savannah's voice drifted from the living room, high-pitched and fake, as she spoke to her phone audience, probably replaying the assault like it was an interesting story to tell. My mother scolded her half-heartedly, though her words were more concerned with how it would reflect on Savannah's brand than with the fact that her daughter was bleeding somewhere in the house. I slipped into the hallway, keeping close to the wall as I walked toward the front door. My father was not in sight, but I heard him muttering angrily in the kitchen, opening cabinets and slamming them shut as if the world owed him something it had failed to deliver. My pulse hammered in my ears as I reached for the doorknob. My fingers wrapped around the cool metal, and hope flickered like a fragile flame in my chest. But the moment I turned it, a hand clamped around my wrist with bruising force. My father's voice exploded behind me. "Where do you think you are going?" I spun around, fear paralyzing me, but the anger burning inside me overpowered the instinct to shrink. I said quietly. I am leaving. I have my interview. He squeezed my wrist harder, his face twisted with disbelief and rage. You are not going anywhere until you fix what you did to your sister, he barked, even though I had done nothing but deny Savannah a chauffeured shopping trip. My mother appeared behind him, arms crossed, lips pinched, shaking her head like I was a nuisance disrupting her morning routine. Savannah stood a few feet away, recording again her phone, raised her eyes bright with anticipation of fresh drama. Something in me snapped. I yanked my wrist free with a surge of adrenaline I did not know I had. My father reached for me again, but this time I backed away quickly and said with a steadiness that surprised even me, I am leaving, and you are not going to stop me. His eyes widened, not with fear, but with the shock of realizing the control he had always relied on was slipping through his fingers. I did not wait for whatever came next. I turned, flung the door open, and ran out onto the porch as fast as my trembling legs would allow. Cold morning air hit my face, stinging the swelling cheek, but it felt like freedom. I ran down the steps and into the yard, not caring that my blouse was stained or my makeup was ruined. Behind me, I heard my father shouting something, his voice cracking with fury and disbelief, but I did not stop or look back. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and searched for the one person I knew I could trust. Jenna, my coworker, my friend. The one person who had always believed I deserved more than the life I was drowning in. I tapped her contact and pressed the phone to my ear, breathless and shaking. She picked up on the first ring, her voice tight with concern. Elena, are you okay? I choked out. No, but I will be. I just need help, Jenna. I need to get out. He tried to stop me from going. He hit me, and I cannot go back in there. Jenna did not hesitate. Tell me your address, she said firmly. I am coming right now. Do not go back inside. Stay where people can see you. Her voice steadied me enough to breathe again. I moved to the sidewalk, sinking onto the curb as the adrenaline began to fade into a deep, trembling exhaustion. I kept my eyes down, watching the pavement blur as pain pulsed through my face and down my neck. But sitting there with the morning breeze brushing my hair and the sun warming the concrete beneath me, I felt something I had not felt in years. Safety. Jenna arrived within minutes, her car pulling up beside me with sudden urgency. She flung the passenger door open and gasped when she saw my face. Oh my God, Elena, get in! And as I climbed into the car, clutching my purse like a lifeline, I realized this was the first step toward a life I finally chose for myself. Jenna drove with one hand, gripping the steering wheel tightly, her jaw clenched in a mixture of anger and worry as she kept glancing at me with quick, sharp looks, as if checking whether I was still conscious. I pressed the cold surface of my phone against my cheek, not because it helped much, but because anything was better than the burning heat radiating from the swelling. My entire face throbbed with every heartbeat, each pulse sending a sharp sting through my skin. As the car sped through the quiet neighborhood, I kept my eyes focused on the window, watching houses blur past each one, holding families I imagined were far gentler and safer than my own. The morning sun illuminated the street, making everything seem too peaceful, too normal, too disconnected from the violence I had just escaped. I felt like I was moving in a separate reality, one where nothing around me matched the chaos inside my chest. Jenna finally spoke, her voice steady but laced with fury. Elena, your face? This is bad. What exactly happened? I hesitated, my throat tight, the words trapped behind a wall of shame and disbelief. I whispered, he punched me. Hard. Jenna exhaled sharply. Of course he did. That man has always scared me. You should have left that house years ago. I looked down at my trembling hands and whispered, I know. But knowing and leaving were two different things, and I had spent my life tangled in obligations, fear, and hope that somehow things might change. Jenna pulled into the parking lot of the Urgent Care Center, a small brick building perched between a pharmacy and a dental office. The sign near the entrance read, Walk-ins welcome, and I felt a faint tremor of relief. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and sterile cotton. The waiting room was nearly empty, with only an elderly couple seated in the corner. The receptionist, a woman in her late 40s with warm brown eyes, looked up with immediate concern when I approached the desk. Honey, what happened to you? she asked softly. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Jenna stepped forward quickly, explaining, "She fell. Hard. She needs to be seen right away." The woman nodded without questions, her expression understanding but not intrusive. That was one thing I loved about urgent care clinics in America. People cared, but they respected boundaries. Within minutes, a nurse guided me down a hallway lined with exam rooms. The fluorescent lights were bright and unforgiving, illuminating every bruise and every swollen curve on my face. I felt exposed, fragile, and strangely relieved. The nurse asked gentle questions while placing a blood pressure cuff around my arm. "Does it hurt to breathe? Do you feel dizzy? Did you lose consciousness at any point?" I answered quietly, trying to keep my voice from wobbling. When the doctor entered, he assessed me with calm, practiced movements. He pressed lightly along my cheekbone and jaw, and I winced sharply. "Looks like you've got significant contusion and facial swelling," he said, his tone clinical but kind. "Good news is I don't feel any obvious fractures, but you'll be sore for days." He offered Ice Pack's mild pain medication and written instructions on caring for soft tissue injuries. Not once did he ask who hit me or how it happened. In urgent care, unless someone is in imminent danger or unconscious, it is the patient's choice whether to report an assault. I clung to that small mercy. After the doctor left, Jenna leaned closer, her voice firm. "Elena, you're not going back there. Not after this." I nodded because I already knew it was true. Something inside me had snapped when I saw my reflection earlier. There was no part of me left that could return to that house. As we walked back to the car, Jenna stopped abruptly and turned to face me. "Your interview is in less than 2 hours. We can still make it, but we need to get you ready." I stared at her, stunned. "Jenna, look at me. I can't walk into a professional building looking like this." She shook her head. "You're not letting him take this from you. I'll help you cover the bruise. We'll make it look like a minor accident. You deserve this chance, and you are not going to lose it because of him." Her certainty steadied me. She opened her makeup bag and gently applied concealer over the swelling, her fingers soft and precise. She layered foundation, added a touch of powder, and adjusted my hair to frame the worst of the injury. It was not perfect, but it was enough. Enough to face the world. Enough to remind me that I was still here. Once in the car again, Jenna handed me a bottle of water. "Drink. You need to stay hydrated." I took a small sip, then leaned my head against the window as she started driving again. Every bump in the road sent a new wave of pain through my cheek, but I forced myself to focus on my breathing. Inhale, exhale, stay awake, stay strong. The closer we got to the Medavance building, the more my nerves twisted into tight knots. What if they noticed the bruise? What if they asked about it? What if the pain made me stumble through my answers? But then a different thought cut through the panic. What if this was my only chance to escape everything I had lived through? When Jenna stopped at a red light, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "You've survived worse than an interview, Elena. You can do this." I felt tears prick my eyes again, but this time they were not from pain. They were from the overwhelming realization that someone finally believed in me. As we approached the downtown area, tall buildings reflected the morning sun, casting long shadows across the streets. The Medavance Tower rose above the others, sleek and modern, its glass glowing a pale blue. It looked like a place where life happened differently, where people were valued, where opportunities mattered. I stared at it with a mixture of awe and fear. "Are you ready?" Jenna asked as she parked the car. I swallowed hard and nodded. "I have to be." When I stepped out of the car and felt the cool city air on my bruised skin, I understood that everything ahead of me depended on this moment. I stood straighter, adjusted my blazer, and pressed a hand to my purse to steady myself. My heart was pounding, but beneath the fear, there was a pulse of determination I had never felt so strongly before. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I was not going back. Not to that house. Not to that pain. Not to that version of myself. I was walking forward, even if it hurt. When Jenna and I stepped into the gleaming lobby of Medavance Health Tech, the contrast between where I had just come from and where I was standing now felt so sharp it almost hurt. The floors were polished white marble reflecting soft overhead lights that glowed like a sunrise rather than buzzing like the harsh bulbs in my family's hallway. The air smelled faintly of citrus and something clean, like possibility, and the gentle hum of conversation blended with the quiet tapping of shoes on the floor. Everything inside this building felt intentional, precise, and safe, a world away from the chaos I had left behind only an hour earlier. I stood there for a moment, frozen by the surreal shift, my bruised cheek throbbing beneath the carefully applied concealer. For the first time since the blow, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake coming here, if Metavance would look at me and see the damage, the brokenness, the evidence of a life unraveling. But Jenna placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Stand tall. You deserve to be here." Her voice steadied me enough to move. I approached the reception desk, slowly trying to hide the tremor in my hands. The receptionist, a woman with sleek black hair and a warm smile, looked up from her screen. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I cleared my throat. "I'm here for the UX Research Associate interview. Elena Brooks." She typed quickly, then nodded. "Yes, you're right on time. Take the elevator to the 12th floor. Someone will meet you there." Her tone was kind, professional, and free of suspicion. For a moment, I wondered how many people walked through these doors, with bruises hidden beneath their clothes scars tucked beneath their sleeves. Maybe more than anyone realized. I took a steady breath and thanked her before walking toward the elevator. Jenna whispered, "You've got this," and I nodded, stepping inside the elevator alone. The doors slid shut with a soft click, enclosing me in a quiet space filled with my rapid heartbeat and the faint hum of machinery. I glanced at my reflection in the elevator's stainless steel panel. The swelling on my left cheek was faintly visible, even with makeup, but the overall effect was not as jarring as before. I looked like someone who had overslept or bumped into a door, not someone who had been hit hard enough to nearly fall unconscious. I lifted my chin slightly, trying to embrace the version of myself that belonged in this building, even if I could not fully believe in her yet. When the elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, a woman in business casual attire greeted me with a friendly smile. "Elena, hi, I'm Melissa. I'll be guiding you through your interview today." Her voice was warm, confident, and calm, the kind of tone that instantly made you feel less alone. She led me down a hallway lined with glass conference rooms, each filled with neatly dressed employees discussing projects with energy and focus. Their voices blended into a low hum that felt inviting rather than overwhelming. I was ushered into a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sunlight filtered in, bathing the table in gold. I sat down carefully, adjusting my blazer, trying not to wince when the collar brushed the edge of my bruise. "The panel will be here in just a moment," Melissa said before stepping out. Alone again, I clasped my hands together, trying to calm the storm of nerves swirling inside me. I whispered to myself, "You survived worse than this. You can survive this too." When the interviewers walked in, 3 of them, each offering warm greetings, I felt myself being pulled into their energy, leaving the morning's violence behind like a distant nightmare. They introduced themselves: Ethan from Product Design, Priya from User Research, and Daniel from Data Insights. Each of them smiled like they genuinely wanted to get to know me. We began with the usual questions: my background, my interest in UX research, my past work experience. My voice shook at first, but as I spoke more, something inside me began to settle. Talking about the work I had done, about the people whose stories I had listened to during my caregiving jobs, about the ways technology failed, the most vulnerable users lit a spark I had nearly forgotten I carried. The interviewers leaned in as I spoke. They nodded thoughtfully. They asked follow-up questions that allowed me to expand, not defend. For the first time in a long time, I felt valued for my insights rather than dismissed for my lack of privilege. Halfway through the interview, I caught Ethan glancing at my cheek. A flicker of concern crossed his face, but he said nothing. He did not ask. He did not pry. He simply continued the conversation with the same calm professionalism, and I felt gratitude swell in my chest. They gave me a design problem to walk through, and despite the throbbing pain in my face, I found myself focusing intently on the challenge. I described pain points, proposed research strategies, and outlined usability considerations. Each answer grounding me further in the reality I wanted to live in, one where my mind, not my fear, guided me. When they asked about a time I overcame adversity, I hesitated, thinking of this morning, of all the mornings before this one, of all the heavy years I carried. Instead of telling them about the violence, I said I learned to stay calm in situations where people around me were overwhelmed. I learned how to listen deeply, and I learned that even small improvements can change someone's entire day. Priya smiled warmly. That's exactly the mindset we're looking for here. Her words felt like a hand reaching into my chest and lifting something heavy away. Near the end, Daniel asked, "What motivates you the most when working with users without thinking?" I answered, the belief that people deserve tools that don't make life harder, especially people who already have to fight through so much. The room softened around me like the sunlight itself leaned in. For a moment, I forgot about the bruise. I forgot about Savannah's smirk and my father's fist and my mother's silence. I forgot the humiliation and the fear. All I felt was the possibility that my life could change, that I was sitting in a room where I finally belonged. When the interview ended, they stood and shook my hand, each one thanking me sincerely for coming. Melissa reappeared to walk me out. "You did really well," she said, offering a reassuring smile. "You should feel proud." Proud. The word echoed through me like something I had not earned in years. As I stepped back into the elevator and descended toward the lobby, pain flared again in my cheek, reminding me of the morning's violence, but this time the pain did not consume me. It simply existed beside the hope rising quietly inside me. When I walked out the building door and saw Jenna waiting by her car, she searched my eyes anxiously. "How did it go?" I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight in my chest finally loosen. "I think," I said slowly, "I think it might have saved me." And for the first time that day, I truly believed it. Jenna drove us away from the Metavance building with a kind of quiet celebration humming in her voice, the kind of hopeful energy that felt almost too bright compared to the heaviness still clinging to my chest. She kept glancing at me with excited eyes, telling me how proud she was and how sure she felt that I had impressed the panel. I tried to hold on to that optimism, tried to let it wrap around the bruised edges of my spirit, but even as I nodded and offered small smiles, a strange tightness began to coil inside my stomach. It was as if a part of me sensed the calm would not last, that the peace settling around me was too fragile to trust. As we pulled into the parking lot of her apartment complex, a modest two-story building with pale yellow siding and potted plants along the walkway, my phone buzzed in my purse, vibrating against a bottle of water Jenna had given me earlier. I reached for it, still smiling faintly from her encouragement, but the moment I saw the email notification on the lock screen, the air around me shifted. My breath hitched, my fingers trembled. The subject line read, "Regarding your interview," and beneath it, the preview text showed a few chilling words that made my heart drop into my stomach. Concerning information was brought to our attention. My pulse hammered violently in my ears as I opened the message. The world dimmed around the bright white of the phone screen. The email was from HR, written with a formal tone that felt cold even through the polite phrasing. They said they had received a voicemail from someone claiming to be my father. They said he had expressed urgent concerns about my mental stability and behavior. They said he warned them that hiring me could pose a danger to the workplace. They said they were required to evaluate the credibility of such claims. For a moment, I could not breathe. I stared at the words, unable to process how reality could twist so quickly, how one man's cruelty could leap through phone lines, slip into a corporate inbox, and stain the opportunity I had fought for with everything I had left. Jenna was talking beside me, asking what the email said, but her voice sounded distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. My vision wavered, my chest tightened, the ache in my cheek intensified, pulsing in sync with my rising panic. I finally managed to whisper, "He called them." The words tasted like smoke in my throat. Jenna froze. But I handed her the phone with fingers that could barely hold on to it. She read the email quickly, her expression morphing from confusion to fury to something like protective resolve. "Elena," she said, her voice far steadier than mine, "this is not your fault. This is him trying to control you." But I barely heard her. My mind spiraled through dark corridors of fear. I imagined the interview panel rereading my resume with skepticism. I imagined them replaying his voicemail. I imagined them sitting in a conference room discussing whether I was unstable, dangerous, unprofessional, risky. I imagined the opportunity slipping through my fingers like sand. My father's voice echoed in my memory, mocking me, telling me no one important wanted me, telling me I did not matter, telling me my future was worthless. This moment felt like the culmination of every one of those beliefs. My chest constricted so tightly I could barely inhale. My hands shook violently as I pressed them against my face, feeling the swelling beneath my fingertips. I whispered, "He is going to ruin everything. He always ruins everything." Jenna grabbed my hands and pulled them gently down, forcing me to meet her eyes. "No," she said firmly. "He is trying to, but we are not letting him." Her words were solid and unwavering, but I felt like I was falling apart, every thread inside me snapping under the weight of grief and betrayal. The emotional crash was so intense, it hollowed me out, leaving me trembling and breathless. I had barely escaped the house alive. I had walked into the interview bruised but determined. I had fought through fear, humiliation, and pain to grasp a future that finally felt within reach. And still, he followed me. Still, he reached out with his cruelty. Still, he tried to pull me back into the cage I had fled. I covered my face again, unable to stop the quiet, shaking sob that escaped my throat. Jenna pulled me into a hug, her arms wrapping around me with fierce reassurance. "Let it out," she whispered. "Just let it out. But listen to me. This is not over." I cried against her shoulder, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet exhaustion of someone pushed beyond every limit. When I finally pulled back, my face blotchy and my throat raw, Jenna handed me a tissue and said, "We are going to fight this. We are going to make sure they know the truth. You are not alone in this." I wiped my cheeks, still trembling, and whispered, "I cannot lose this job." Jenna shook her head. "Then we will not let you." But even as she spoke with conviction, the fear lingered like a cold hand gripping my spine. Because in that moment, the truth hit me with a clarity worse than pain. He did not need fists to break me. He just needed a phone. Jenna guided me into her apartment with the careful urgency of someone handling fragile glass, her hand steady on my back as if she feared I might collapse under the weight of everything that had happened. Her place was small but warm, decorated with soft beige tones, oversized throw blankets, and framed prints that carried affirmations like "You are stronger than you think." I had always admired how her home felt like a refuge from the world, something I never truly had in my own life. The moment the door shut behind us, the silence settled heavily, broken only by my uneven breathing and the distant hum of traffic outside the window. I sat on her couch, still clutching the tissue she had given me earlier, my mind spiraling through the worst possibilities. The fear of losing the job was sharp enough to slice through every other thought. I whispered weakly, "They are going to think I am unstable. They are going to believe him." Jenna knelt in front of me, her eyes fierce, her voice calm, but carrying the kind of conviction that forced me to listen. "No, they are not," she said slowly. "You are forgetting something important." I blinked, confused, wiping the remnants of tears from my cheeks. "What am I forgetting?" She stood up and walked toward the small desk in her living room. On top of it sat a closed laptop, a mug filled with pens, and a stack of neatly organized folders. She picked up the laptop and returned to the couch, placing it gently on the coffee table. Then she took a breath and said, "Elena, I used to work in Metavance's ethics and compliance department." The words landed like a jolt of electricity in my chest, shocking enough to distract me from my anxiety for a moment. I stared at her in disbelief. "You what?" Jenna gave a small nod. 3 years, before I transferred to the Illinois branch of the company's customer support division. She folded her hands in her lap and continued, "I know the internal processes. I know how they handle harassment claims, false reports, misconduct, and any attempts at intimidation. And I know exactly who to contact when something like this happens." My mind scrambled to piece together the implications. Slowly, an ember of hope flickered somewhere behind the thick fog of fear. Jenna opened her laptop and typed swiftly, the keys clicking rhythmically. "Your father thinks if he speaks loudly enough, he can shape the truth. But Metavance does not tolerate interference in hiring decisions, especially from people outside the company. No HR department in the United States takes kindly to someone calling with claims about a candidate's mental state when they have no evidence, no involvement, and no legal standing. She clicked another window open and turned the screen slightly so I could see the company's internal directory. She pulled up a name. Lamar Williams, she said, tapping the screen. Director of Ethics Oversight. I worked under him. He is fair level-headed and absolutely hates when outside parties try to manipulate internal processes. I leaned closer, my breath catching. Jenna, I don't want you to get in trouble. She shook her head firmly. I won't. I am not accessing anything I should not. I am not hacking internal systems. I am not logging into anything confidential. I am using public-facing compliance pathways that any employee or candidate has the right to use. And I am contacting someone I have a professional history with. Everything I am doing is within policy. She opened a new document and began typing notes. We are going to put together a timeline, she explained. We are going to outline exactly what happened, what your father said when he said it, and how it violates hiring ethics. We will attach evidence when we get it. My throat tightened. What evidence? Jenna paused and looked at me with a serious expression that sent a chill down my spine. Elena, HR departments archive every voicemail left on their systems, even personal ones. If your father called them that, recording exists. I covered my mouth with both hands, stunned. You mean they have it? His voice. She nodded. And if he left threatening, manipulative, or defamatory messages, those become official records. They cannot just throw them away. She turned the laptop back toward herself and continued typing, her face set in a determined expression I had rarely seen before. Your father messed with the wrong system, she said quietly. He tried to sabotage your livelihood. That is not something Metavance will ignore. I watched her type, each keystroke steady, almost surgical. The fear in my chest began to shift, replaced slowly by something sharper and stronger. Jenna, I whispered, why are you helping me this much? She paused and sat back against the couch, her eyes softening. Because I know what it is like to have someone try to silence you. Because you deserve better. Because I care about you. And because someone should have fought for you a long time ago. My eyes stung again, not from pain this time, but from the overwhelming feeling of finally having someone in my corner. She handed me her laptop. Tell me everything, she said gently. Start from this morning, from the moment Savannah came into your room. We will document it all. I began speaking slowly, haltingly, recounting the events leading up to the assault. My voice shook when I described Savannah recording me. It cracked when I repeated the words my father had screamed. Jenna typed silently, only interrupting to clarify details. When I finished, she exhaled and said, We are going to send this to the compliance inbox with a header marked urgent. They will review it. They have to. Her certainty was a lifeline. She stood and returned with 2 cold packs from her freezer, handing one to me. Put this on your cheek, she instructed. You need to manage the swelling. As I pressed the cold pack against my skin, I felt the numbness spread, dulling the pain slightly. Jenna sat beside me again. Listen carefully, she said. This is not just about the job anymore. This is about making sure your father can never interfere with your future again. The words sent a shiver down my spine. She was right. This was bigger than an interview. This was about freedom. Jenna worked for hours writing, organizing, and refining the report. She edited the language so it was professional, factual, and strong. By the time she finished, the sun had lowered in the sky, casting orange streaks across the living room. She turned the laptop toward me again and said, Read it. Tell me if anything is missing. I scanned the report, slowly absorbing every line. It was thorough. It was truthful. It was powerful. And it made me feel seen. When I finished, I nodded. Send it. Jenna clicked send without hesitation. The email vanished into the system, carrying with it the first piece of my resistance. She closed her laptop gently and looked at me with a small, steady smile. He thinks he won, she said quietly, but he has no idea what's coming. And in that moment, for the first time since the blow, I believed her. The next morning arrived with the dull heaviness of an overcast sky, the kind that makes the air feel thick and unmoving. and I woke on Jenna's couch with a stiff neck and the metallic taste of fear still lingering in my mouth. My cheek throbbed with a steady pulse, swollen and tender, a physical reminder of everything I had barely escaped. The room was quiet, except for the faint sound of a neighbor's dog barking somewhere outside, and I sat up slowly, carefully, feeling the muscles in my jaw protest as I opened my mouth to breathe. Jenna entered the living room holding 2 mugs of coffee, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and her expression focused in a way that made my chest tighten with gratitude. "Drink," she said gently as she handed me one of the mugs. "You're going to need your energy." I wrapped my fingers around the warm ceramic, grateful for the comfort of it, even as dread curled into my stomach. "Did they respond?" I asked quietly, afraid of the answer. Jenna nodded, setting her laptop on the coffee table. "They sent an auto reply last night acknowledging receipt," she said. "But this morning? We got something new." She opened the laptop and clicked into her inbox. There at the top was an email from Medavance HR marked Internal Follow-up. My throat tightened as she clicked on it. The message was concise. They were requesting that I come in for a private meeting that afternoon to discuss the report. I felt panic rise like a sharp wave, the fear that they were calling me in to reject me, to tell me my father's lies had tainted everything. But Jenna placed a calming hand on my knee. "If they wanted to dismiss you," she said firmly, "they would not request a meeting. They would send a formal rejection email and be done with it. This means they're taking your complaint seriously." I tried to breathe through the spike of anxiety, but my fingers trembled around the mug. "What if they talk to him?" I asked. "What if he lies again? What if he twists everything?" Jenna shook her head. "He already lied. And they have the voicemail. They have the proof. What he did is documented, archived, and out of his control." She turned the laptop fully toward me, opening a second attachment the HR representative had included. My breath caught when I saw it. It was a transcript, a full written record of the voicemail my father had left them the day before. Seeing his words typed out made them feel even more cruel than hearing them. The transcript showed him calling me unstable, dangerous, a risk. It showed him telling them I had attacked him, that I had thrown objects, that I had a violent temper. It showed him framing himself as the frightened parent of a mentally unstable adult daughter. None of it true. All of it familiar. Lines I had heard him throw at me in different forms since childhood now crystallized into a document sitting on a corporate server. My hands shook so violently that I nearly spilled the coffee. Jenna took the mug gently from my fingers and set it aside. "This is exactly what they needed," she said. "He exposed himself." My eyes stung as I whispered, "Why would he do this? Why would he go this far?" Jenna's expression softened. "People like your father thrive on control. They need to own your choices. The moment you stepped out of that house, you broke the narrative he built around you, so he tried to yank you back." She paused, then added, "He didn't expect the consequences to reach him." I wiped the tears from my eyes quickly, ashamed of how easily they came. "I feel like I am living someone else's nightmare," I whispered. Jenna shook her head. "No, you're living the final chapter of your old life, and it is falling apart because it was never built on truth." She reached beside her and pulled out a folder she had prepared the night before. Inside were printouts, screenshots of the threatening text messages Savannah had sent me, the bruises on my face from multiple angles, the doctor's notes from urgent care, and the initial report she had typed. "We're taking all of this to the meeting," she said. "They need to see the entire picture." I stared at the folder, feeling an unfamiliar sensation bloom beneath the fear. Strength. A strength that came from seeing the truth laid out in actual evidence. Evidence that couldn't be brushed aside, minimized, or dismissed the way my family always dismissed me. Evidence that carried weight. Evidence that could bring a man down. "There's more," Jenna added, pulling her phone from her pocket. "HR forwarded me the voicemail file itself because they may need your acknowledgement that the voice is indeed your father's." My stomach flipped. Hearing his voice again felt unbearable but necessary. "Play it," I said, even though my pulse was pounding in my throat. Jenna tapped the audio file. My father's voice filled the room. Even through the speaker, it carried the same venomous confidence he always used when putting me down. He told HR he feared for his safety. He claimed I screamed at him. He claimed he only wanted to warn them for their own good. The final line was the one that made my blood run cold. He said, "She is not stable. You would be making a serious mistake if you hired her." When the audio ended, the silence in the apartment felt deafening. I pressed a hand over my mouth, struggling to breathe. "He wanted to destroy me," I whispered, "before I even had a chance." Jenna nodded, and instead, he handed us the strongest evidence we could have ever asked for. She reopened the laptop and pulled up one more email. This one from a contact she still had within the company's ethics team, someone she trusted. It simply said, "I have seen the initial report. There will be consequences." I stared at those words until they blurred from the tears gathering in my eyes. Consequences. A word I had wished for my entire life but never believed possible. "Elena," Jenna said softly, "your father crossed the one line corporations never forgive. He attempted to interfere with a hiring decision using harassment and fabricated claims. That alone is enough to trigger a full investigation." She took my hand and squeezed it. "This is going to change everything." I swallowed hard. "What do I do next?" "You go to the meeting," she said. "You answer their questions. You let them see the truth." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what was coming, but also the strange lightness of no longer being alone. As Jenna organized the documents back into the folder and handed it to me, I realized something profound. My father had spent years trying to silence me, but now every word he spoke, every lie he told, every threat he delivered was being recorded, documented, and transformed into evidence that could collapse the image he had built of himself. Evidence that could finally expose him. Evidence that could bring a man down. The hours leading up to the meeting felt like a strange limbo, a suspended stretch of time where everything inside me churned at once. Fear, hope, anger, exhaustion, and something sharper that I did not yet dare to name. I showered carefully, avoiding the tender swelling on my cheek, feeling the hot water sting my bruised skin as it dripped onto the floor. When I stepped out and caught my reflection in the mirror, the discoloration had darkened into a deep purple bloom spreading across my cheekbone like a storm cloud. My jaw felt stiff, my eye slightly swollen, but there was something new in the reflection too. A hardness, a steadiness, a kind of quiet rebellion rising beneath the bruises. Jenna handed me a cup of tea while she organized the folder again, double-checking every document. "You're ready," she said, glancing up with a reassuring smile. "We are walking in with truth and structure. They will see that." I nodded, even though my stomach twisted. "What if they think it's too much drama?" Jenna shook her head immediately. "Ethics departments handle worse than this. What they won't tolerate is someone outside the company manipulating internal decisions. Your father gave them a direct violation to act on." Her certainty eased a fraction of the tension in my chest. We drove to the Medavance building in near silence, the steady hum of the engine grounding me. I pressed the cold pack gently against my cheek, hoping the swelling would settle just enough for me to look composed. As we approached the towering glass building, my breath hitched. Yesterday, it felt like opportunity. Today, it felt like a battleground. Jenna parked the car and turned to face me. "Listen," she said softly. "You are not here to defend yourself. You are here to clarify. Let them handle the rest." I nodded. My throat felt too tight to speak. Inside the lobby, the receptionist recognized me and gave a polite nod. "You can head to the HR wing on the 5th floor," she said warmly. "They're expecting you." "Expecting me?" The phrase echoed strangely, sending a tremor through my hands as I pressed the elevator button. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, a tall man in a gray suit was waiting. He looked to be in his early 40s with calm eyes and an expression free of judgment. "Ms. Brooks?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Lamar Williams. Thank you for coming in." My pulse quickened. This was the man Jenna had mentioned, the man who hated interference. He gestured for me to follow him into a conference room with frosted glass walls. Jenna gave me an encouraging squeeze on the shoulder before staying behind in the waiting area as instructed. Inside the room, a second HR representative sat with a notepad offering a gentle smile that helped ease my nerves slightly. Lamar took a seat across from me and folded his hands. "We want to get a better understanding of the situation," he began. First, I want to make something clear. Nothing in this meeting affects the outcome of your interview. That process remains separate. What we are discussing today is the external interference that took place. Relief washed through me in a warm wave. I nodded silently. We received a voicemail yesterday morning, he continued carefully. A man identifying himself as your father made several claims about you. Before we move forward, I need to confirm whether the voice on the recording is indeed his. My chest tightened, but I nodded. Yes, I whispered. That was him. Lamar pressed play on his laptop. Hearing the voicemail again in this quiet professional room felt surreal, the ugliness of his lies filling the air like poison. When the recording ended, Lamar paused before speaking. Thank you, he said. That was important for our documentation. The HR representative leaned forward. Ms. Brooks, we reviewed the report sent from your colleague. It contains detailed information including photos of your injuries, medical documentation, and text messages. Are you confirming all the information presented there is accurate? I swallowed hard. Yes, I said again. Every part of it is true. Lamar nodded slowly. Your father's call constitutes a serious breach. He attempted to influence a hiring decision through false statements, intimidation, and fabricated claims. This is considered harassment under our external interference policy. My breath trembled. Hearing him call it harassment validated something deep inside me, something I had never been allowed to acknowledge. Furthermore, he continued because he referenced his position at his company and implied professional authority. His actions may violate an entirely separate set of standards. Companies cannot use their roles to manipulate our hiring process. I blinked, stunned. What happens now? Lamar exchanged a brief look with the HR representative. We have already initiated the first phase of an internal review, he explained. We have also notified his employer as we are required to do when an external party misuses professional influence against our candidates. My heart lurched. You notified them already? Yes, he said simply. This kind of interference cannot go unaddressed. The HR representative tapped her pen thoughtfully. We also want to ensure your safety. Are you currently staying somewhere secure? I nodded. I'm with a friend. Good, she said. If you need any documentation for legal protection, we can provide that. My fingers gripped the folder tightly, the pressure grounding me as the weight of their support began to sink in. Lamar leaned forward slightly, his expression firm but compassionate. Ms. Brooks, he said, I want you to understand something. You did nothing wrong. What your father did was inappropriate, unethical, and potentially damaging to your future. We will handle this. You focus on your career. My vision blurred slightly from the sudden rush of emotion. I whispered, Thank you. The meeting wrapped up soon after with instructions to remain reachable and a promise that the investigation would proceed quickly. When I stepped back into the waiting area, Jenna stood immediately. How did it go? She asked. I let out a shaky breath. They believe me, I said softly. They're taking action. A slow smile spread across her face. Good. As we left the building, the weight on my chest felt lighter, the fear less suffocating. For the first time in my life, someone in authority had looked at the truth and chosen to fight for me instead of against me. And as the sun warmed my bruised cheek, I understood something with absolute clarity. My father had tried to control my future with a single phone call, but he had unknowingly triggered the first strike in a battle he could not win. The fallout began faster than either Jenna or I expected, unfolding in sharp, deliberate waves that spread outward like ripples from a stone dropped into deep water. The morning after my meeting with Medavance HR, I sat on Jenna's couch, sipping lukewarm coffee, my cheek still throbbing with a deep bruise that had settled into a dark mix of purple and green. The swelling had gone down only slightly, and even the gentlest touch sent a sharp ache through my jaw. Despite the pain, I felt strangely lighter, as if the weight of years had cracked open. Jenna paced the living room with her phone in hand, checking emails and messages. Her expression sharpened into something like battle readiness. When her phone buzzed with a notification, she glanced at the screen and froze. Elena, she said slowly, you need to see this. My stomach tightened as she handed me the phone. It was a forwarded message from one of her former coworkers at the ethics department. Someone named Kayla, who had a reputation for being direct and relentless. The email simply said, "They are opening a full investigation on his end. Actions already initiated." I stared at the words as they sank in. My father's attempt to sabotage my future had triggered consequences he could no longer control. Jenna sat beside me. "It means his company is taking this seriously," she explained. "They have to. No corporation wants to be associated with someone who commits professional misconduct and harassment. This is not going away quietly." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert. Jenna clicked it open and gasped softly. "You're kidding," she whispered. "Already." She turned the phone toward me. My breath caught. A small local online news site had published a brief breaking story. Local business consultant under investigation for harassing tech company during hiring process. The article didn't name my father outright yet, but it gave enough detail that anyone familiar with him locally would know. It mentioned interference in a hiring decision, professional misconduct, and an ongoing corporate review. A wave of shock rolled through me. I whispered, "It's real. It's really happening." Jenna nodded. "It's happening because of his choices, not because of you." But the impact did not stop there. Within hours, things escalated. My father's company released a formal statement acknowledging the investigation and confirming that he had been placed on temporary suspension pending further review. I felt my hands trembling as I read the announcement on their official site. For years, he had walked through life with unchecked arrogance, wielding his position like a badge of authority. Now that very badge had been turned against him. As the day progressed, the fallout widened. The local Chamber of Commerce, where my father served on 2 committees and often flaunted his influence, issued a notice stating they were requesting clarification regarding allegations of ethical misconduct involving one of their members. I could almost hear his outrage echoing in my memory, the indignation he would feel at being questioned publicly, but there was no comfort in imagining it, only a strange, bittersweet ache. And then the next blow landed. Savannah. Jenna was scrolling through social media when she suddenly stopped, her eyes widening. "Oh my God," she murmured. "She's trending, for all the wrong reasons." My stomach sank. What did she do now? Jenna showed me her phone. Someone had leaked a clip of Savannah's live stream the day I was hit. Not the part where my father struck me, but the part afterward where she laughed, zoomed in on my pain, and said, "This is crazy," like she was watching a reality show unfold. The clip was circulating on TikTok and Instagram with hashtags like #HatCruelSister and Influencer Gone Wrong. The comment sections were brutal. People condemned her for mocking a victim, for playing with violence, for content, for acting like my assault was entertainment. Sponsors started quietly distancing themselves. One brand announced they were halting collaboration due to recent behavior misaligned with company values. Jenna scrolled further. "She's losing deals," she said. Fast. A strange mixture of sadness and justice swirled in my chest. Savannah had built her world on curated perfection and strategic manipulation. Seeing that world crack felt surreal. Still, I whispered, I did not want this for her. Jenna looked at me with a soft but firm expression. "Elena," she laughed, "while you were bleeding on the floor." I closed my eyes. The memory hit like another strike. The humiliation, the sting of betrayal. The cruelty masked as entertainment. When I opened my eyes, I realized Jenna was right. I hadn't caused this. Savannah had. Later that afternoon, another email arrived from Medavance HR. This one was brief but powerful. "We have escalated the matter to the appropriate channels. Please remain available for follow-up." Before I could process it, Jenna's phone rang. It was Kayla. Jenna tapped speaker. "They're taking it to the top," Kayla said bluntly. His company found the voicemail. "It's bad, really bad. He referenced his role, used threatening language, and tried to intimidate your HR department. They cannot ignore this, and frankly, they won't." I swallowed hard. "What does that mean for him?" Kayla paused. "It means his suspension won't stay temporary for long." The words echoed in my mind long after she hung up. Evening settled across the apartment, filling the room with muted golden light. I sat on the couch with the folder of evidence in my lap, my fingers tracing the edges of the papers Jenna had so carefully arranged. Each page represented a truth I had carried alone for years. And now, finally, those truths were doing something, changing something, undoing something. Jenna sat beside me, leaning her head gently against my uninjured shoulder. "You understand what's happening, right?" she said softly. "The system is finally holding him accountable." I nodded, but my throat tightened. "I spent my whole life thinking no one would ever believe me," I whispered. "Now the people who matter do." Jenna squeezed my hand. "And this is only phase 1. The words lingered in the air, heavy with promise. My father had spent years asserting control through fear and anger. He had shaped our home into a place where truth was buried and his version of reality dominated everything. But now, his lies were being pulled into the light. His influence was unraveling. His authority was crumbling. And for the first time in my life, the world was not bending around him. It was bending around the truth. The fallout was only beginning. The collapse of my father's carefully constructed world did not unfold quietly or subtly. It cracked open with the slow inevitability of a fault line giving way beneath decades of pressure, tearing through every illusion he had relied on to maintain control. The first shock came 2 days after the local article appeared, when his consulting company released a formal announcement that spread across LinkedIn, local news sites, and professional forums with startling speed. The statement read that Richard Brooks had been officially removed from his advisory role, following an internal ethics review triggered by documented interference in an external hiring process. The message was cold, clinical, and mercilessly clear. There was no mention of temporary suspension now, no phrasing that suggested a possibility of reinstatement. He had been terminated. I read the announcement 3 times, my breath trembling, my heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and a dark, quiet justice I had never expected to witness in my lifetime. Jenna sat beside me on her couch, scrolling through the reactions online. "They're distancing themselves completely," she said. "They can't afford to be tied to someone who weaponizes his position to harass another company, especially not in this industry." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were sharp with satisfaction. For so long I had felt powerless, crushed beneath his anger and manipulation, and now to see an institution finally act against him felt surreal. But the fallout did not stop with his job. That evening, the local Chamber of Commerce updated their public member directory. His name had been removed entirely. No explanation, no footnote. Simply erased. For a man who had spent years bragging about his influence committee positions and community standing, this erasure was not just professional, it was personal. It severed the public identity he had clung to as proof he mattered. I imagined him sitting alone in the living room, staring at his computer with that stunned expression he used to wear when something didn't go his way, except this time there was no one to blame but himself. And then the second ripple hit. A journalist from the same local site that published the first article received confirmation from multiple sources that an ethics violation had indeed taken place, and they updated the story with specifics. It now named him directly. It mentioned his attempts to influence hiring decisions at Metavance. It outlined the corporate policies he had violated. It quoted an anonymous source saying his actions were being viewed as potential misuse of position and harassment. The comments exploded. People who had worked with him years prior chimed in. One former coworker wrote that his temper had always been an issue. Another commented that the news was unsurprising. I read each comment slowly, feeling years of silenced reality finally spoken aloud by people who had seen cracks in him long before I ever realized the world outside our home could see them too. But the true earthquake arrived the next morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "You need to see the news." I clicked the link she sent me, and as the page loaded, my breath froze. A new headline blared across the screen. "Corporate investigation reveals threats left on company HR line." My heart began to race as I read. The article described how the voicemail my father had left at Metavance did not simply include lies about my mental state. It contained statements interpreted as threats toward the hiring staff. He implied consequences. He used hostile tone. He referenced his professional role in a way that suggested he was speaking with authority. Medavance had forwarded the recording to his employer. His employer forwarded it to their legal team. The legal team had conducted an internal investigation and determined he had violated not one but 3 sections of their professional conduct policy. It was over. Completely, absolutely, publicly. I stared at the screen so long the letters began to blur. Jenna placed a hand on my arm. "He can't come back from this," she said, "not professionally, not socially." He burned every bridge with one voicemail, but as the world around him crumbled, a part of me worried about the storm gathering inside my family's house. I knew the rage that lived in my father's chest. I knew how he reacted when he felt cornered, and now he had lost everything he believed made him powerful. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Savannah. Her message was long and full of fury written in frantic bursts. "Do you realize what you did? Do you realize you ruined Dad's entire career? Everyone is talking about us. My sponsorships dropped me because they think our family is toxic. You destroyed everything." I stared at the message, a strange sense of detachment settling over me. For once, her words didn't cut. They didn't sting. They didn't make me feel small. Instead, they sounded childish, delusional, hollow. After a moment, I typed back one sentence. "He did this. Not me." She responded instantly, her anger escalating. "Stop lying! You caused this! Just fix it!" I read her messages in silence, realizing she was clinging to the only narrative she had ever known, that I was the problem, that I was the issue, that I was the source of anything that went wrong in her world. But the world had stopped believing that narrative. Institutions had stopped believing it. People with authority had stopped believing it. And now, even if Savannah never admitted it, she could no longer hide from the truth. Late that afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity overcame fear. It was one of the investigators from my father's company. Her voice was calm and professional. "Ms. Brooks, she said I wanted to personally inform you that the investigation regarding your father has concluded. We have terminated his professional contract effective immediately. Additionally, we have notified the Chamber of Commerce of our findings and will be sending them a formal report." I swallowed hard. "May I ask why you're calling me directly?" There was a brief pause. "Because the voicemail he left contained personal statements directed toward you in a harmful and defamatory way. We wanted you to know that we take matters like this very seriously. No one has the right to interfere with your career or your well-being in this manner." My breath wavered as I whispered, "Thank you." She ended the call with a gentle reassurance. "You did the right thing by reporting this. I'm sorry for what you went through." I sat very still after the call, staring at Jenna's coffee table while my heart pounded with disbelief. For the first time in my life, someone in a position of power had apologized to me. Someone had acknowledged my suffering without minimizing it. Someone had told me I was right. The following day brought the final collapse. A new article was published, this one more widespread. It detailed the full scandal, the termination, the ethics violations, and the voicemail. It quoted experts on the seriousness of professional misconduct. It quoted community members expressing shock. The ripple became a tidal wave. His reputation was gone. His influence was gone. His career was gone. Everything he used to crush me under his thumb had been stripped from him by his own actions. And for the first time, I felt something settle deep inside me, something long buried, something fierce, relief. Not cruel relief, not celebratory, but the quiet relief of someone who had lived under a storm for years and had finally stepped into sunlight. My father had always taught me that he was untouchable, but the truth was simple. He had simply never been challenged, until now. The first morning I woke up without the familiar weight of dread pressing on my chest felt almost unreal, as if my mind had not yet caught up with the fact that the world I had known for 27 years had shifted permanently. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of Jenna's spare room, casting soft golden lines across the bedspread, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to simply breathe, not cautiously, not waiting for footsteps in the hallway or raised voices downstairs, just breathing because it was safe to. I sat up slowly, touching the fading bruise on my cheek with gentle fingertips. It still hurt, but the pain no longer carried the same sting of humiliation it once did. Now it felt like evidence of a battle survived, a reminder that healing was not just physical. It was something deeper, something earned. Jenna knocked lightly on the door before peeking her head in. "You have an email," she said, holding out her phone. There was a glimmer in her eyes that made my heart skip. I took the phone and tapped the screen. It was from Medavance. My breath caught as I read the first line. "We are pleased to inform you that we would like to offer you the full-time position." For a moment, I could not think, could not speak. The words blurred through a rush of emotion so overwhelming I pressed a hand over my mouth to steady myself. Jenna sat beside me, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." I exhaled a trembling breath as tears filled my eyes. The offer included relocation assistance, mental health support, and a start date 2 weeks out. They had chosen me, not because someone pulled strings, not because I begged, but because I earned it. Despite the chaos, despite the violence, despite everything. I spent the next hour staring at the apartment listing Medavance had included in their email, imagining myself walking into a place that was mine. A place where no one yelled, no one demanded, no one hit. A place where breathing would always be this easy. Jenna insisted we celebrate, even if only with cheap champagne and takeout noodles. We sat together at her tiny dining table, and as we clinked glasses, the emotion in her eyes almost undid me again. "I am proud of you," she said simply. "Not because you survived, but because you chose yourself." That night, I lay awake in the dark, replaying every moment of the past week. The punch, the voicemail, the investigation, the consequences, the truth. For the first time, the memories did not induce panic. They felt distant, like scenes from a life I had finally escaped. Over the next few days, everything moved quickly. I signed the lease on a small studio apartment close to Medavance headquarters. The walls were freshly painted white, the floors a warm oak, and when I stepped inside for the first time, I felt something settle deep inside my chest. Safety. Not borrowed. Not conditional. Mine. I bought a new mirror for the bathroom, simple with rounded edges. When I hung it on the wall, I stared at my reflection for a long time. The bruise was fading, a faint shadow of purple under my skin. But the woman looking back at me was different, stronger, steadier, alive in a way she hadn't been in years. I moved in with only 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box of essentials Jenna helped me pack. No furniture, no hand-me-downs, no reminders of the house I had left behind. Every item in my studio was something I chose intentionally, from the soft gray bed sheets to the single potted plant I placed near the window. I wanted my new home to be a place where nothing was tainted by pain. Medavance sent me onboarding documents, and each time a new email arrived, a warm thrum of gratitude filled my chest. I was really doing it. I was building a life. On the day before my start date, Jenna helped me pick out an outfit that made me feel confident, polished, and unmistakably new. As we grabbed coffee afterward, she looked at me over her cup and said, "This is just the beginning, Elena." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle into my bones. The beginning of a life without fear. That evening after Jenna left, I stood in the center of my studio and listened to the quiet. Not the tense silence of my childhood home. Not the dangerous silence that followed violence. This silence felt soft, still, comforting. My silence. I walked to the window and looked out at the street below, watching strangers move through their lives with a casual ease I had always envied. For the first time, I felt like I belonged among them, not as someone hiding scars, not as someone carrying shame, but as someone finally free. In that moment, I whispered to myself, "You made it out." And I knew it was true. The final confrontation came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when the world feels still and ordinary, which somehow made what happened next feel even more surreal. I had just finished organizing the last box in my new studio, placing a small framed photograph of Jenna and me on the shelf near the window, when my phone began to ring. The number flashing on the screen made my stomach twist violently. It was my father. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out, pretending I hadn't seen it. pretending the outside world didn't exist beyond these peaceful four walls. But something inside me, something steadier and stronger than fear, told me to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear and said nothing at first. His voice broke through the silence, raw and unsteady in a way I had never heard before. "Elena, he said we need to talk." The familiarity of his tone tugged at something deep inside me, but I did not let it pull. My voice came out calm. "What do you want?" There was a long pause, then a strained inhale. "You destroyed my life," he said. "Everything I built, everything I worked for, gone. Do you understand what you've done?" I closed my eyes, feeling a tremor rise in my chest, but forcing myself to remain grounded in the small safe room I had created. "I did not destroy anything," I said quietly. "You did." His voice cracked into anger. "Don't talk to me like that. You think you can just walk away from your family. You think you can ruin my career and pretend like you're some kind of victim." My fingers tightened around the phone. "I didn't ruin your career. Your actions did. Your lies did. Your voicemail did." He scoffed, the sound sharp and bitter. "I did what any father would do. I warned them about you." The familiar sting of his words brushed against old wounds, but they no longer broke through me the way they once had. I said nothing. The silence between us stretched thin and tense. Then, unexpectedly, his tone shifted, cracked at the edges. "Elena, please," he said. "We are drowning here. Your mother is terrified. Savannah is losing everything. You have to help us." My breath caught, not from guilt, but from shock at hearing the desperation he had never allowed himself to show. "Help you," I whispered. "After everything." His voice rose again, frustration bleeding through. "Family doesn't abandon each other. Families fix their mistakes. You need to tell them it was a misunderstanding. You need to withdraw your complaint. You owe us that much." The old Elena would have folded right there, crushed under the weight of obligation and conditioned guilt. But the woman standing barefoot in her tiny, sunlit studio was not her anymore. "I owe you nothing," I said, my voice steady, calm, unshakable. "Not after the years of yelling. Not after the years of belittling. Not after the day you hit me and told HR I was unstable. Not after you tried to destroy my future before it even started." He exhaled sharply as if my words physically wounded him. "I was angry," he said. "I was trying to protect your sister. You know how she is. She needs opportunities. She needs support." I felt a cold wave of clarity wash over me. "You always protected her," I said softly. "Even when she was wrong. Even when she hurt me. You never once defended me." He did not answer, and the silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. He had no defense, only expectation, only entitlement, only the belief that I would eventually come back to the role I had been forced into my entire life. The peacemaker, the quiet one, the daughter who endured. Not anymore. "You need to fix this," he said suddenly, the desperation returning to his voice with a frantic edge. "They took my job. They kicked me out of the chamber. Everyone is talking. Our reputation is ruined. This is your fault." Something inside me clicked into place. A final lock. A final break. "I did not destroy your reputation," I said, my voice low and resolute. "You did. You chose to lie. You chose to threaten people. You chose to hit me. These are not misunderstandings. These are consequences." He cursed under his breath, a familiar sound, but this time it held none of the power it once carried. "You think you're better than us now?" he spat. "You think your little job makes you superior." I felt my heart steady. "No," I said. "I think the truth makes me free." He inhaled sharply, and for the first time in my life I heard fear in his silence. Real fear. The sound of a man realizing he no longer had power over the thing he had controlled for years. "Elena," he said, finally, voice trembling. "Come home. We need you." I looked around my studio, my bed, neatly made my coffee mug waiting on the counter. My new life standing vividly around me, and I understood something with perfect clarity. "I am home," I said, "and I am not coming back." Before he could speak again, I added the final sentence that had been waiting in my chest since the moment his fist struck my face. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped letting you destroy me. Then I hung up, placed the phone gently on the table, and let out a long breath that felt like the first true breath of my entire life. For the first time, there was no fear, only freedom. The first weeks in my new life passed slowly at first, like watching dawn crawl across a quiet horizon, but with each passing day, the colors grew brighter, fuller, more real, until I realized I had stepped into a world I never believed could belong to me. Every morning, I woke in my small studio apartment to the soft hum of early traffic below the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the cafe across the street and the gentle sunlight that stretched across the wooden floor. It was ordinary, almost painfully ordinary, but to me, it felt miraculous. There were no slamming doors, no raised voices, no footsteps pacing outside my bedroom. The silence was no longer something to fear. It was something to sink into, like warm water. My first day at Medavance felt like a rebirth. I walked into the gleaming glass building wearing the outfit Jenna had helped me choose, my badge clipped to my blazer, my hair tied back neatly, and for a moment I had to steady myself as the wave of disbelief hit. I belonged here. Not because someone had vouched for me, not because I'd forced my way in, but because I earned it. The lobby buzzed with quiet activity. Professionals in crisp shirts and tailored suits passed by with purpose, and when I stepped into the elevator, I caught my faint reflection in the stainless steel and almost didn't recognize myself. Not because of the fading bruise which now stretched over my cheek in soft shades of yellow and green, but because of the expression I wore. Steady, determined, awake. My onboarding group consisted of 6 others, and as we went through orientation, I listened to them share their backgrounds, degrees, past employers, internships, career goals. When it was my turn, I spoke calmly about my history in healthcare support work, the long nights, the patients I cared for, the resilience those years forged in me. No one looked at me with pity. No one questioned whether I belonged. They simply nodded. As the days unfolded, I learned the systems, the workflows, the expectations of my team. My manager, a woman named Diana with a thoughtful expression and a habit of tapping her pen while thinking, welcomed me warmly. She never once mentioned the investigation. She never asked questions about my personal life. She valued my work, my ideas, my presence. It was the first time a person in authority saw me without trying to mold me into something convenient. One afternoon after my second week, she pulled me aside. "I've noticed something about you," she said gently. I tensed instinctively, waiting for criticism. Instead, she smiled faintly. "You are incredibly composed under pressure. Most new hires panic the first few days. You stay steady. That is rare." I swallowed hard, the truth of her words sinking deep into my chest. My steadiness had not been a choice. It had been survival, but now it was a strength. A real one. Outside of work, my life began to bloom in ways I never imagined possible. I bought a small dining table so I could eat meals that weren't rushed or taken in secret. I hung soft curtains, placed a candle on the nightstand, and bought a second plant because the first one seemed lonely in the corner. Slowly, my studio began to look like the home of someone who believed she deserved comfort. I talked to Jenna every evening. Some nights, she came over with takeout, tossing her keys on the counter and kicking off her shoes like she'd lived there her entire life. She would sit cross-legged on my floor while we talked about work, about her plans, about the ridiculous videos she found online. She never treated me like a fragile thing. She treated me like someone rebuilding, someone rising. And then, one evening, as we were drinking tea on the floor by the window, she said something that made my breath stop. "You know," she murmured, gently nudging my knee with hers, "you're not just surviving anymore. You're living." I didn't respond at first. The words felt too heavy, too true, too transformative to absorb quickly. But as I stared out at the city lights flickering below, I felt them settle into the quiet space inside me where old wounds were slowly closing. Living, not hiding, not enduring, not shrinking. Living. Several weeks later, I received a letter addressed to my new apartment. The handwriting on the envelope struck a chord of recognition that made my stomach tighten, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a short note from my mother. Her words were stiff, careful, coldly polite. "Elena, we hope you will reconsider and return home. Your father is having a difficult time. Savannah is devastated. We need to heal as a family. We miss you." I stared at the letter for a long time, my pulse steady, my breath even. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the harm, no accountability. Only longing for the role I used to play, the one who absorbed pain to keep peace. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. I did not respond. My life was finally growing beyond the walls of that house. I wouldn't walk backward. At work, I formed new friendships with two coworkers from my team, Miranda and Joel. We grabbed lunch together, shared stories, laughed about the absurdities of office life, and for the first time I felt included. Not tolerated, not judged, included. One afternoon, as we sat outside eating sandwiches, Miranda asked me how I liked living alone. I hesitated, then said honestly, "It's peaceful." She smiled. "You look happier every day." I felt the words like sunlight on my skin. Even though not everyone in my life knew the details of my past, they could see the change. They could sense the transformation. On weekends, I explored the city. I walked through parks, browsed bookstores, sat in cafes, watching strangers live their quiet lives. These simple things, once impossible luxuries, now felt like small acts of freedom. Sometimes I touched the faint scar forming near my cheekbone and remembered the moment when everything shattered. And then I remembered the moment I chose myself instead. It no longer hurt. It no longer made me ashamed. It made me proud. That scar was not a reminder of violence. It was a reminder of victory. One night, as I prepared for bed, I stood in front of the mirror I bought for my new apartment. The reflection staring back at me was unmistakably mine, but she was different from the woman who once flinched at every raised voice. My posture was stronger, my eyes clearer, my presence fuller. I had grown into myself in ways I never expected. I touched my cheek gently and whispered, "You're safe now." And I was, completely, finally, truly safe. As I crawled into bed, I felt a wave of calm wash over me, deep and warm and certain. The life I had escaped from no longer held power over me. The people who hurt me no longer shaped my future, and the job I had fought so desperately to protect was now the foundation of a life built on choice, not fear. I closed my eyes with a soft smile, knowing with absolute certainty that I had stepped into a future forged from courage, truth, and freedom. And as I drifted into sleep, one final thought settled into my heart like the gentle closing of a long-awaited door. The hit that broke my face saved my future. Before you click away, take one moment with me right here, right now, because if you've watched this far, if you felt even a flicker of anger rise in your chest or a sting behind your eyes, when Elena stood up from that floor, you already know this story wasn't just entertainment. It was a mirror, a reminder of every time life hit you hard and you had to decide whether to stay down or get back up. And I want to speak directly to the men and women out there, especially those of you over 50 who have lived long enough to know that family can be your home or your battlefield. Because when you've seen generations rise and fall, when you've carried the bruises no one else saw, when you've walked away from people you thought you could never live without, you understand the weight of Elena's journey in a way younger folks rarely do. So let me ask you something from one soul to another. Where are you watching from right now, and what storm did you survive to get here? Because I promise you, every one of us has a story of the moment we finally said enough. And if this video stirred up an old memory, a name you no longer speak a home, you no longer visit, then let this be your reminder that choosing yourself is never selfish. It is necessary. And if you felt rage when that father raised his fist, if you felt disgust when that sister filmed the pain like it was entertainment, if your blood burned hot because you've known people who hurt you and smiled while doing it, then don't carry that alone. Drop a comment, share where you're watching from. Tell us what part of the story hit you the hardest, because your voice matters here. Your perspective matters here. Your healing matters here. And if you are someone who spent your entire young adulthood being the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who tolerated too much because you thought love required sacrifice, then hear me when I say this. You didn't fail your family by walking away. You saved yourself. And that is never something to feel ashamed of. I want you to hit that like button if you believe Elena deserved better. Hit subscribe if you want more stories where the truth finally wins and the abuser finally pays the price. Because on this channel, we don't glamorize toxicity, we expose it. We don't let manipulators have the last word, we give the microphone to the survivor. And if you're reading this and thinking, my God, that could have been me, or that was me, then let's connect, let's speak, let's grow this community into a place where people who've lived enough life to know the signs can support those still learning them. And before you go, I want you to ask yourself one honest question. What would you have done if you were in Elena's shoes? If you were staring down the people who hurt you, and they finally had to face the consequences of their own actions? Because whether you would have fought, walked away, stayed silent, or set the world on fire, your answer says something about the journey you've taken in your own life, and I want to hear it. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your age. If you're comfortable, tell me what this story reminded you of, because every comment becomes part of the conversation, part of the healing, part of the shared strength of strangers who refuse to be broken again. Thank you for staying to the end. Thank you for witnessing another story where justice doesn't wait for karma. Justice comes from the courage to speak, the courage to stand, and the courage to never go back.